located down by the water, and we saw the fire trucks coming back from the damage area. So there was a lot of Poland Springs water down there, so we were handing them to the firefighters because their faces were just so distraught.
They were distraught, and one of the interesting things is you said that they seemed numb. Can you describe how they looked?
Yeah, so we were giving them water, and they just took it, and they looked like they were looking into space. Everybody was clapping for them. That hasn't gone in yet, but everybody that was coming out, they were just, I mean, reality, it looked like it really hit them.
So the people who were going into the people who were coming out of the building after trying to rescue, after trying to put out the fire, were numbed by what they had seen. John, you are here because you're also handing out pamphlets, flyers, asking people to volunteer to donate blood. Can you tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, New York City tomorrow, we're having a blood donation, blood drive from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the New York Hospital on 68th Street and New York Avenue. They're in extreme need of blood, especially people of type O, but anybody that can come down, donate blood. Everybody's encouraged. I've been handed to the volunteers, and you know, it's something that I hope a lot of people can do. I hope this message will get to everybody out there.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for volunteering tonight. Rosanna and Harry, back to you in the studio. I'm Barbara Nevins-Taylor reporting live.
All right, Barbara, thank you very much. We want to show you some of the very first seconds of this tragedy as it unfolded this morning. Good Day New York was on the air, and it happened right in the middle. Let's take a look now. You can see here with this videotape that the camera was actually rolling. It was on the ground. What the hell was that?
It sounded like a plane crash. Yo, close to you.
Come to us, come to us. Come to us. Come to us. Hey, Beth, what is that? Somebody hit the World Trade Center or the...
It's a Trade Center.
The World Trade
Center.
There's a fire on the upper floors.
The voice you're hearing is Dick Oliver this morning as he was trying to get the attention of the producer to make sure that we were able to carry this signal live to you, and the shocking reality of what happened. You could hear the initial crash.
And now here's the video of the planes. Actually, this is the second attack on World Trade Tower 1. And you know, no matter how many times you see this video, it still seems unbelievable that this happened in our city. Early this morning, several hours ago. I've seen this piece of tape several times today. This is from a different angle, and it still seems unbelievable. All right, the airports were locked down after those attacks. No planes in or out. Let's go back to Mary Garofalo at LaGuardia right now. Mary.
Well, Rosanna, you know, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but today is September 11th. That's 9/11, and whether or not that has any significance, you really have to wonder. But out here, there has been a 911 call for personnel, armed forces personnel, who are coming to this city to help rescue crews with the recovery efforts tomorrow. We do have some breaking news, and it's disturbing. This evening, about 5:30, a white truck from the Meadowlands heading to the Manhattan-bound side of the GW Bridge was stopped on the just before the approach on the bridge. It had a truckload of explosives in it. Now, 3 men have been apprehended. We do not know at this point whether they have been arrested. We are hoping to get more information as the evening goes on. Now, there was an APB put out on this vehicle, and police were able, luckily, to stop it before it got on the bridge. Here, Port Authority officers were just starting to exhale a little bit and thinking that the worst had been over. Well, now they are back on full security alert, fearing that there is much more going on around them. They are worried. They were concerned that this truck perhaps might have been targeting the GW Bridge, although we do not have confirmation of that. And we hope to get more information this evening and report that to you as it comes our way. Reporting live from LaGuardia Airport, I'm Mary Garofalo. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Mary, thank you very much. Another part of the country was under attack, but the fourth hijacked plane never made it to where the terrorist actually wanted to go. A passenger locked himself in a bathroom and called 911 to tell them terrorists had taken the controls. United Airlines Flight 93 crashed in Somerset, Pennsylvania. That's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. It left Newark and it was on its way to San Francisco 45 people were on board, all of them died.
And the plane attack on the Pentagon left at least 100 people dead and an ugly gaping hole in the side of the building. Mike Emanuel reports.
Washington, D.C. is transformed into a war zone. Tonight, political leaders are trying to calm anxious Americans. The symbol of America's military strength, the Pentagon takes a direct hit from an act of terrorism, a commercial jet crashing into America's military brain trust. It's too early to know the number of dead and wounded. The president is promising punishment for those responsible for these terrorist acts.
I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Officials say the U.S. military is ready to act when it's necessary.
But make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
The attack on the Pentagon leads to evacuations of the White House and the U.S. Capitol. Much of the federal government is shut down. Commercial flights are canceled. Defense officials say despite the damage to the Pentagon, it is still functioning. Hours after the attack, the thoughts and prayers of many are focusing on the thousands of victims.
Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened.
Officials say the U.S. has not retaliated so far for the terrorist attacks. The military is on high alert, watching the skies over Washington. At this point, people of different political backgrounds seem to agree it is time to unite. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Flags were lowered to half-staff at the Washington Monument. It was an eerie sight. It was closed to tourists. Later, they even brought in bomb-sniffing dogs to patrol the place. Well, how did the terrorists manage to fly those planes at the Trade Center? Nick Gregory is also a pilot, and he's got some answers. Nick.
Well, Rosanna, these airplanes, of course, that hit the World Trade Center originated in Boston. And the original flight plan out of Boston would bring these planes up over southern New Hampshire and Vermont and then out over upstate New York. At some point during that flight is, of course, when the hijackers took over. Now, I want to show you a picture of a cockpit of a 757 that we have here. And what's interesting in the design that Boeing had on these aircraft, the 757 and the 767, they are very similar in design. The cockpits are almost identical. The type of systems are identical. The only thing that really differs are the size of the engines and the size of the cabin, the 767 being a wider aircraft. Now, as you look at the cockpit here, up in this position, this is the autopilot controls all up through here, and some of the radio controls. The controls that the pilots would hand fly the airplane are over here. This is the thrust levers, or the power levers as they're referred to. And also what you can see right down in this corner here, these two little green screens are the navigation systems. Now, when these planes depart their airports, the flight crews will put in the flight plan into these little flight computers, and just after takeoff, they'll engage the autopilot up in here, as the way Boeing really designed these airplanes is for the autopilot to fly the majority of the time with the pilots monitoring the systems all along the way. Now, at some point in the flight, when the terrorists made their move, they would have to be knowledgeable, really, of how to disengage the autopilot up in this system and reprogram the navigation system to their choice, and then fly the airplane actually by hand. Now, that's no easy task. A very close friend of mine is a Boeing 757 pilot, and recently I had the opportunity to sit in a couple of his training classes and actually fly the simulator for about an hour and a half. And I got to use the autopilot, and I got to hand fly the airplane, and I can tell you that that is not done without some experience. So they had to be some knowledge in how to work these flight controls in these systems to get the airplane to fly in towards the New York City area and the World Trade Center, of course, given the fact that they were originally programmed to fly into the Los Angeles area. So again, there definitely seems to be, in my opinion, some knowledge on these hijackers as to actually how to fly the Boeing 757, Rosanna and Harry.
All right, thank you very much. We have been checking with all of our reporters all night long. Let's check in with James Ford right now. He is at 6th and Broome for us tonight. James?
That's right. The operative street to point out here is 6th Avenue. Take a look. At 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, ordinarily this street would be packed with cars and people, but police doing a very effective job of keeping people out of the southern end of Manhattan. And take a look over here on the left. That's one of the MTA workers. We've had about 12 of them walking up from the World Trade Center area. They are still on the clock and therefore haven't been able to stop and chat. But what they did say was that the Chambers Street stop down by the World Trade Center, that pretty much that tunnel has collapsed, and they have had to clear out a lot of the debris from that location. And what they're doing now is heading farther north, probably to the West 4th Street station, to lend a hand there and make sure that trains are running smoothly, and some of them can go home from there. We have coming up now even more people who've been working down at the scene. I can tell you about 2 blocks west of here on the West Side Highway, there have been crews just lined up for a long time. Actually, let's see if these folks will talk to us. Can we chat with you for just a moment? Do you mind? Can we just see? I know it's been a long night, but it's been a very long day for us. Do you? Okay, thank you. But that's essentially the scene that we've been seeing here all night long. It's just sporadically people who have been working down here at the scene coming north on 6th Avenue from the financial district, from the World Trade Center area, after having spent most of the day either waiting for mobilization to see if they could be of any service, or having worked down there like this other MTA worker, and then coming out because also the subways aren't running. They begin running from West 4th Street north, so that means down around Canal Street and Point South, trains aren't active, so everyone's been walking in this particular area. Sir, may we talk with you briefly? You're an MTA worker. Have you been down at Chambers Street? What have you been doing tonight? In fact, all day.
Well, sir, I've been here since early today. I'm a volunteer, search and rescue, and I've been here all day long, and I never seen so much blood today in history. I mean, this is.
Where in the World Trade Center area were you? Where have you been?
Right close to the building, right next to the building. I had to run all the way to Chambers Street.
And I noticed that you have a sledgehammer with you. Did it see any use? What did you actually end up having physically to do today?
I pulled out a couple of bodies, a few bodies out of there. Helped out on that, you know. And they had tower number 7 falling down, so we had to get out of there because it was unstable. And eventually the building fell down. You have another building right now that is unstable right now, and you got a lot of hot spots, a lot of fire, and a lot of chemicals, you know, from the fire. So you can't get in there. Nobody can get in there.
Do you know which building remains unstable at this point?
It's a great building. I don't know which building is that.
Right, but it's part of the World Trade Center complex.
It's around the area.
For you, I want to be gentle here.
Yes.
To go through that experience of having to pull bodies from this wreckage, what was it like for you? How are you coping?
My friend Roy is a volunteer, and he's still in the debris right now. When the building collapsed, he was in the building, you know, so it's horrible, you know. And you know what kills me the most? That we're on state emergency right now, right? That's 911. We're on the 9th month on the 11th day. It's horrible. It's horrible, you know.
Thanks for talking with us. We're
Thank
sorry
you.
that it's under these circumstances. Good luck to you, sir.
My heart goes to all the family and friends of all the people, you know, in here.
Okay.
God bless you guys, you know.
Good luck, Godspeed. Thank you. Well, there's nothing more I can add after that. We are here on the scene on 6th Avenue. I'm going to give it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, James. Incredible.
Wow.
We're going to go now to Mike Gilliam, who has some helpful information to get you around. Mike.
Thanks, Rosanna. We've been compiling a number of phone numbers that you can use and websites that you can use to find loved ones and that sort of thing. So you may want to grab a paper and a pencil. We'll give you some of that in a moment. But first, let me just update you a little bit on the rails. The LIRR, service on the LIRR is back to normal, and they expect it to be normal tomorrow during the morning rush. Metro North has been operating on a Saturday schedule, that word from Metro North. Now for those numbers. The city is saying that if you have problems out there that you might call 911 for normally, you should not call 911. The mayor asks that you call 212-560-2730. That number again is 212-560-2730. Also, for missing persons, if you have a loved one that has not come back yet or you think may be staying in Manhattan, a way to try to locate them would be to call 212-447-2998. That number again is 212-447-2998. Now, as far as websites are concerned, there are a couple of them that may be able to help you out a bit. A lot of people were taken by ferry to New Jersey. There's a website, www.ahnj.com. That's for survivors. That is for New Jersey's Atlantic Highlands Emergency Center. That's for people who were taken over there by ferry, so you can try that one. Also, there's another one, www.ny.com. That is for survivors as well. That is a website where a person who has survived this horrible attack can enter his name, where he is, and people can check up that way. Now, a number of the companies that do business around the World Trade Center and in those towers, they have also set up numbers. Morgan Stanley, the number there is 888-883-4391. That's 888-883-4391. Deloitte and Touche, their number is 888-243-7676. 888-243-7676. And Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, the number they are using is 866-761-8265. That's 866-761-8265. Now, we'd also like to remind you that all public and Catholic schools will be closed tomorrow. That includes all of the schools in the New York Archdiocese. NYU is closed tomorrow. Jersey City and Bayonne schools will also be closed tomorrow. Broadway theaters were closed tonight. They will be closed tomorrow for the matinee. And the city will be closed from 14th Street south. We'll continue to try to compile all of these numbers for you, and we'll bring them back to you over the course of the evening. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. Let's join Bob O'Brien right now. He is in Jersey City, one of the most beautiful sights in the entire city. Used to be from that side of the river in Jersey City, looking at the World Trade Center. Bob, what can you tell us?
That's right, Harry. You know, this act of war did target the World Trade Center in New York City, but just across the Hudson River here in New Jersey, the evil riveted everyone's attention. From the Weehawken Bluff, the black scar on the sunny morning sky was breathtaking when first glanced. Susan Edwards stood on her front yard overlook as she described what she saw Tuesday morning when she ran out of her house.
I saw the first tower, all black smoke, and then the white smoke. I knew the fire was under control. And then I went in, and I put the radio on, the television on, and I'm looking through my main window here, and I see the second plane go in. I saw the explosion. I said, this is a terrorist attack. It was so frightening.
All ferry boat services pressed every vessel into action, offering free rides off Manhattan Island as evacuated people tried to get home to New Jersey. Carrie Joseph was one of those ferried out after she escaped the Merrill Lynch offices in the World Financial Center next to the World Trade Center. That's where she works, on the 21st floor, when the two planes hit. Then she and others ran to the ferry boats, only to be horrified again.
We saw about 5 people jump out of the Trade Center.
From how high?
80s, 90s.
Floors.
Floors. Very high.
They were just
jumping.
Couldn't take the fire.
Right. Right from where the smoke was coming out of the World Trade Center 1.
They all went at the same time.
Mm-hmm. On either side.
The Broad Channel Fire Department sent 2 ambulances from their place in Queens. They arrived at the World Trade Center just after the second plane hit. Chris Kalisak was one of 4 Broad Channel firemen hurt.
There were actually body parts laying on the ground, along with parts of the plane and parts of the building. And what we did was we parked our apparatus under an overpass that was between the buildings across the street. So we figured we would be safe from that, but apparently once that explosion went, it was like...
The second plane.
Yeah, with the second plane, it was just like when the debris came down, it was actually like a tidal wave of debris. And I mean, I looked back while I was running and I saw like fire department apparatus sliding sideways, and that's how bad the wind was. It was like a tornado.
More than 100 doctors, many of them surgeons in the New York metropolitan region for a convention, rushed to the Liberty State Park and formed a triage area. But most of the severely injured people were transferred here to the Jersey City Medical Center and other area hospitals. We are told, however, that there are several bodies being held in a temporary morgue in Liberty State Park. In Jersey City, Bob O'Brien, Fox 5 News. Harry, back to you.
All right, Bob, thank you very much. Muslims all across America quickly condemn the terrorist attacks. They don't want people to think that they are responsible. After the Oklahoma City bombing, you remember, there was a sudden surge of anti-Islamic sentiment around the country. This ended after Timothy McVeigh was caught. Well, today Muslims say that there is no reason for this kind of brutality.
Whoever came in this mosque today everybody was sad. They said that innocent people, they shouldn't be killed.
All that was done today was to murder innocent people and not to contribute to having a peaceful world.
Muslim groups are asking their members to help the victims of the attack by donating blood or providing medical help.
And in the Mideast, when Palestinians in East Jerusalem heard the news, thousands took to the streets and did something unconscionable. They celebrated. They poured into the streets, many chanting, "God is great," even handing out candy. They apparently do that when they celebrate. Many believe the U.S. takes sides with Israel. Palestinian leader Arafat condemned the attacks and sent condolences to the many victims of the series of assaults.
Dozens of United States embassies closed all over the world right after these attacks in New York and in Washington. The State Department gave most of them the option to stay open, but they told officials to make sure that they took every precaution. The embassies in the Middle East are closed indefinitely. In Venezuela, the embassy shut down and it erected concrete barriers.
Well, with us right now is Michael Wilds. He's a lawyer who's had plenty of dealings with terrorists because some of them are his clients, and they have helped our government head off possible attacks in the past. Michael, what happened today?
We'll find out. The fact is, a tragedy occurred on U.S. soil.
We all know that. Did your clients or any of your clients in the past ever give our government any kind of inkling of what's going on or what may have taken place today?
Absolutely. I had a phone call earlier today from a naval intelligence officer who had dealt with one of my clients in the past. And every time there's been an atrocity, something has been linked to some of the cases that I've been involved in. The fact is, these people are human assets. They have connections within the bin Laden infrastructure, and they've provided this information.
Well, what did the intelligence officer say? What kind of information did they get?
Well, they're looking right now for everything and anything. The fact is, they were caught with their hands down. Why two planes were able to make their way to the World Trade Center has to be explained to millions of Americans.
Is, I mean, it's not a situation where I think we want to give anybody blame right now, but what kind of information did they receive?
Your sources. I mean,
what did they say?
Well, the fact is, my discussions with my clients are separate, and they're right now cooperating with the government. In fact, that's why I represent these individuals, people who have cooperated with intelligence services to give them this information. What we want to know, actually, is there an infrastructure? Are there terrorist cells that are brewing in the New York area? What, if anything, did they do to give a safe haven to these individuals?
But, I mean, doesn't today's attack prove?
Pardon?
Doesn't that prove it? Today's attack,
absolutely.
Doesn't it prove it?
It speaks scores to the testimony of people that have gone to Capitol Hill in the years past that have been asking congressmen to legislate to stop these kind of atrocities. I hope the intelligence community will be able to cull out this information, and I hope that a lot of other host of attorneys will protect their clients, but at the same time cooperate with law enforcement to make sure that they'll get this material.
Did you do that?
Absolutely. I was representing a gentleman who was implicated in the Colbert Towers in 1996. He blinked the lights, allegedly, and then a truck came up and killed 19 Americans. Yeah. I represented him as a former federal prosecutor only to make sure that he would give more information on other people up the chain of command.
Now,
then he didn't, and he was removed.
Is that usually where this intelligence information comes from? Former diplomats, that kind of thing?
Well, the fact is that you can get as much information as you can from satellites, from artificial intelligence. The best, though, is human assets, and they're very far and few between. There were two diplomats that walked in to a police precinct about 2.5 months ago in New York. These are people that need to be cultivated. A message has to be sent to the UN that we will not tolerate your violating your diplomatic cover, and that if you are in U.S. soil, you're going to have to respect Lady Liberty, who's only but a few hundred or 1,000 yards from that atrocity
today. All
right,
thank you, Michael. John Rowland now is in the newsroom with some late information. John.
All right, thanks, Rosanna. The hope of finding survivors in the rubble of the World Trade Center is being fueled by reports of cell phone calls that are being made from victims who are trapped there. Now, the police commissioner said their rescuers have determined there were some people alive in a couple of those buildings downtown. A police source has told us that they've gotten some phone calls from people who were trapped in the rubble of the Twin Towers. In one of those calls, a surviving civilian said he was trapped with a police officer, an officer who has been reported as missing. Major League Baseball has canceled the Yankee game at the stadium tomorrow. They were supposed to play Game 2 against the White Sox. Today's game was canceled also. So was every other ball game around the country. That hasn't happened since D-Day. Security is extremely tight around the house at Ruth Bill tonight. We're told it's surrounded by police right now. In Connecticut, the governor there says it's going to be business as usual in his state tomorrow. He wants everybody to return to work. He says the school buildings are safe. He wants them back in school. He is also willing to send some equipment from the National Guard here to our city if we need it. And he also plans to open Bradley International Airport at about noon tomorrow. And the airports here in New York are supposed to open at about noon, but it may be later than that, noon at the earliest. Harry, Rosanna?
All right, John, thank you very much. Other part of the story that we're covering tonight, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton responded to these attacks in America. She says that she supports President Bush and his plan to hunt down the terrorists and said that she understands how tough it is to clean up the city.
I'm very proud of New York City, the mayor, the police, the fire.
Half of the initial blasts of the hijacked planes crashing into them, the third tower going, actually which is called building number 7, much later in the day. Let's come back to what city officials are confronting in terms of the injured and the potential dead. Hillary Lane has just finished listening to a news conference that St. Vincent's Hospital held. This is one of the hospitals closest to the World Trade Center area. What can you tell us, Hillary?
Well, Paula, I can update you again on the numbers, and that is going to tell you a lot. They are not very different from the last time we reported them. 369 patients passing through. That's just about 5 more from the last time we reported. 4 deaths reported here, 1 at an affiliated hospital. That says a lot. According to one doctor here, and I'm going to quote him, by not seeing a lot of patients, they fear that there are not a lot of survivors. So the process down at the site moving very slowly, meticulously, gently. We had been reporting earlier they had pulled some people out of the wreckage. The hospital here had gotten a phone call at 7:45 a.m. telling them to expect some of those people, but they have not received any more phone calls alerting them of any more survivors who may have been pulled out of the wreckage this morning. They have brought in quite a number of firefighters and rescue workers who were involved in the rescue effort, and some of their injuries are incredibly telling. They have abrasions on their fingers from literally digging with their fingers, trying to move rubble, trying to help people who may still be alive. And that really says a lot for the rescue effort that's going on. But what also says a lot is behind me, empty stretchers, empty wheelchairs, and dozens of hospital personnel here on standby and waiting to do what they're needed to do if they should be called into action. Paula?
Hillary, you just mentioned the folks on standby, and I think that Mayor Giuliani wanted the message heard loud and clear that New Yorkers will not be paralyzed by what has happened to this city. He said there have been thousands and thousands of people who volunteered to help the paramedics, who volunteered to do whatever they can in the cleanup process. We know people in record numbers are offering to donate blood. And I understand, Hillary, at a bunch of hospitals around the city, you have doctors traveling from out of town to volunteer their services at emergency rooms. Have you seen that there at St. Vincent's? I think you mentioned a part of that about a minute ago.
Absolutely. I spent the day at Bellevue Hospital yesterday, and from early in the morning, there were people coming in off the street. There were 2 nurses from Texas here in New York City on vacation, heard about this, rushed in as quickly as they could to offer their services. Dozens of volunteers, and I tell you, the line to donate blood stretched out the door. They were moving people in groups of 50 to get them processed, to get the blood in and to be ready. So an incredible, incredible volunteer effort, professionals and civilians as well.
That's more. All right, Hillary, thanks so much for that update. If I'm understanding this clearly, someone's just giving me some messages from the New York Medical Examiner saying they are perfectly, the system at least, this sounds very hard and cold, but this is a fact of dealing with this tragedy, that they can handle more bodies. There were some reports, and in fact, we reported some of the Associated reports this morning that barges had actually taken some of the dead from New York into New Jersey. That is not the case. However, it is true that some New York City cab companies have removed seats from their vans to help in the transport of victims across the river to New Jersey, where some of the city hospitals there can accommodate some of the wounded. And I think it'll be clearer in the days to come exactly what transpired last night. I think one of the biggest frustrations of all of the workers who've been involved in this rescue process is that they weren't able to even get into that perimeter area surrounding the World Trade Center until the wee hours of the morning.
because of the fear of structures continue to fall on them, and the amount of smoke billowing out from the area, and other safety concerns. So there you have it, Darren, the very latest from New York now. And as you've seen, or actually Leon, a tremendous outpouring of support for these firefighters and police workers who have to do the Lord's work right now.
Yeah, definitely, Paula. We've seen much of the same sort of reaction in the other focal point for this story as well in Washington, D.C. Many people there coming together, rallying to the cause, if you will. Now, the latest that we've gotten there on the scene at the Pentagon is that the Pentagon is telling people and reporting to the press that they don't expect any more survivors to be pulled from the rubble there. You're seeing in our live picture the work that goes on there at that scene. We just checked with our Bob Frank, and it was saying that they believe that they have found some places where there may be bodies, and they will be getting them after they get more control over that fire that is still continuing to burn. But the victims that were pulled out of there and that were able to walk away from that location there are at Arlington Hospital, which is where our medical news correspondent Rhea Blinky is right now. Let's check in with her to get the latest from there. Rhea?
Yeah, Leon, more than any other hospital in the United States, the Virginia Hospital Center at Arlington is the one that should be most prepared for a terrorist attack because of its close proximity to the Pentagon. This hospital's metal was tested yesterday when during a 3-hour period, make that a 2-hour period, some 30 patients were brought here with various contusions, burns, broken bones. The staff here was on an orange alert at that time, and there was nowhere near any level of great concern because of this hospital's preparation. Periodically, they do actually go through a number of procedures to make sure that they have all their procedures in line. In fact, some of the administrators who were involved in the emergency services yesterday mentioned that they had seen the plane crashes into the 2 World Trade towers, and that they indicated, you know, what would happen if something like that occurred here just moments before the plane crashed into the Pentagon. They went back through their materials, and within 10 minutes, they got the call that, in fact, we've had an attack. We need to make sure that we have everything up to speed. We want to make sure and show you some pictures of some of the people who arrived yesterday. As I mentioned, during that 2-hour period, 30 patients, but overall, some 44 patients treated here at Virginia Hospital Center. Many of those people have been released, 26 of those people discharged, but some 17 were admitted. Of those 17, 9 of those people went to ICU. 2 of them listed in serious condition, 7 of them in critical condition. Some of the others are now stable at this time, and one of the people was transferred because they're military personnel to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. There are a couple of other hospitals in the area, including the Washington Hospital Center, which is the only major hospital center here that has an adult burn center. They take more of the serious injuries at the Washington Hospital Center. There are some 12 patients there now. 7 of those patients listed as critical with severe burns. At Walter Reed, we mentioned there's one transfer from here, but also 2 other patients, military personnel. And it's anticipated that some of the other patients who have come to this facility and others around the area will also go to Walter Reed as they stabilize, if in fact they are military personnel. And one other hospital in the region, Inova Alexandria Hospital, took in 14 patients as a result of the attack on the Pentagon. It's been a very challenging time for this hospital, but again, they feel that they've stood up extremely well. In fact, their code orange alert, which is their highest status of alert, in which they call in all the staff members and get as much help as they can, is now canceled. They suspect, it's not very likely, they will receive more patients from the rescue and recovery operations, even though they want to keep hope alive. They certainly don't anticipate that they will see large numbers, the waves of patients that they saw yesterday. Leon?
Rhea, quickly, if you can tell me, are you hearing any word about there being blood shortages there, as we were hearing in other places like up in New York?
We did hear yesterday that Inova Alexandria Hospital was having some problems with blood shortages. We are not hearing that today. In fact, we checked with Washington Hospital Center, and they too seem to be having good blood supplies. However, we don't want to discourage people from donating, but we don't understand that it's necessarily a problem at this point.
All right, well, that's good news. Rhea Blinky reporting live for us this morning from Arlington Hospital. Darren?
The story, of course, affecting not just here in the U.S., but all around the world. And in fact, as we understand it, a quarter of U.S. embassies around the world are still closed today. For more on that, let's go to the State Department and our Andrea Koffel. Andrea.
Darren, this is really the other half of the story. While the search and rescue is going on here in the United States, the diplomats in this building, including the top U.S. diplomat, Secretary of State Colin Powell, sent out orders yesterday for all embassies to review their security procedures. And as you mentioned, the final tally as things stand right now is that More than 50 out of more than 260 U.S. embassies and consulates around the world have now temporarily closed their doors, and we're told that all of the embassies in both the Middle East, on the Arabian Peninsula, and in North Africa have closed. Now, they say that this was done really as a precautionary measure. They have no real specific or credible threats to these embassies, but they'd rather be safe than sorry. Now, while the embassies are closed, there is another effort that's underway. In the words of one State Department official, Darren, it's really a message of, are you with us or are you against us? That's the message Secretary Powell is sending out as he speaks with leaders around the world, trying to rally the international community to the United States side. That's not a difficult effort right now, as we've heard calls coming in from around the world expressing support for the United States. And as we've already reported, right now at the NATO headquarters in Belgium, in Brussels, ambassadors there from all 19 NATO member states are right now reviewing a draft which would give the United States upfront support if and when it makes the decision that it knows who was behind yesterday's attacks, that all of NATO's military capability would be at the ready should the United States need it. So right now what you're seeing is an intense diplomatic effort both within NATO, the United Nations, the European Union, with the Russians, with the Pakistanis. We understand Secretary Powell also spoke with people in that country. Why is that significant? Because they're the neighbors and supporters of the Taliban militia in Afghanistan. Darren, so right now as things stand, we have more than 50 U.S. embassies that are closed and intense diplomatic efforts underway.
Yeah, and on
Darren?
that point, Andrea, I want to get this quick, but I think important question in here. I imagine there are a lot of Americans traveling overseas who are following the story, are perhaps scared. If they're in a country where the U.S. embassy is closed, who are they to contact if they're in trouble and need information?
That's a very good question. If there are emergency needs that any U.S. citizens might have, we're told that they can still contact the embassy. What it means is that the embassy isn't open for business for things like visas and whatnot. But if an American citizen should have need for information or any advice, things of that nature, they can call their U.S. embassy or consulate as they would do under any circumstance.
Very good point in clarifying exactly what closed means in terms of an embassy and business. Andrea Koppel at the State Department, thank you. Paula, back up to you in New York.
All right, Darren, I want to share some new pictures with our audience out there of what Ground Zero looked like yesterday, shortly after the impact of the multiple terrorist attacks here, when two hijacked planes slammed into two separate World Trade Center towers 18 minutes apart. A lot of the people who evacuated the North Tower, which was the first tower hit, describe it taking 45 minutes to get out of the building. So in fact, the second jet had hit the South Tower at the time they were being evacuated. They didn't even know what was going on above them. This looks relatively calm as you look at these pictures, but folks who are being evacuated from these buildings describe something different. Some people in a state of panic, some people screaming, and those diligently following the instructions of the law enforcement agents. The one thing you also need to understand, this picture obviously was taken after both towers had collapsed, which had happened in sort of the 10 o'clock hour of this broadcast. The one striking thing about the city today is that it is, at least to me, as someone who's lived here a long time, eerie. It is unbelievably quiet. There's a good reason for that. Most companies advise their employees not to go to work today. All the public schools are closed, the private schools, the parochial schools. The major stock markets are closed today. As you just heard Darren and Leon say, no flights are expected to resume today, at least not at noon today, as was originally expected. And right now I want to go to a piece that Maria Hinojosa filed to give you an idea of just how strange it is out there, particularly for those of us who are used to a city that's full of vitality. Let's go.
Midtown Manhattan, the heart of New York City. Usually abuzz, today quiet. An awful quiet.
This is what downtown looks like where I come from.
a quiet that stretched all the way from the foot of Manhattan through what should be bustling streets.
Normally you just pass and go about your daily work, but now you stop to say hello, how are you?
A quiet at the Port Authority, where hundreds of commuters should be gathering. Quiet, too, at Penn Station, where a flood of travelers is supposed to emerge, today a trickle.
Usually it's elbow to elbow, trying to run and get the train and just get to your job.
And outside on the street, the Madison Square Garden marquee, black.
This is the M104 to the United Nations.
It's hard to believe that in the middle of a Wednesday morning, in the middle of 6th Avenue, in the heart of Greenwich Village in Manhattan, that there's no traffic, nothing behind me, nothing coming from in front of me, standing in the middle of 6th Avenue. It's the eeriest of feelings.
People jostling around, running around, bumping into people, not caring about anything, because we're in such a great free society. And now we have to be careful of what we may do. People look at people apprehensively. So it's a different feeling altogether.
Businesses were closed except to help rescue workers. So were bridges and tunnels. Even the pet shop was closed.
Not up there. Not up there.
Usually trucks roll by at 5:30 in the morning in front of our home, and it wakes us up, and you're kind of, and today there was nothing. It was so strange. I actually want the noise back.
Instead of work, the sign said that people should give blood or pray. And missing from the sky, that signature view of downtown Manhattan, the Twin Towers used to poke into the sky. Now there's just space. A lot of things missing in New York today. That New York attitude, gone for now. Maria Hinojosa, CNN, New York.
And I must say to Paul, up there in New York, even from our perspective here in Atlanta, for many of those of us who have visited New York so many times, that is eerie to see a city that quiet and that somber. Well, let's talk now about the investigation into finding out exactly who is responsible for this. Officials are saying that early investigation into these deadly attacks point to Islamic extremist and alleged terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden. Our national correspondent Mike Betcher is joining us here on the set. He's got the latest for us on the investigation, and you've been checking out things. And I want to ask you, first of all, in looking at what you've heard, seen so far, and talking to those you have, has anyone said to you that they think that the 4 attacks that happened yesterday were the only 4 that were planned? Because that, to me, would seem sort of strange to think that any group that could be so efficient that they would have 100% effectiveness or efficiency here.
Well, I was told by one source that they wanted to ensure, they're speculating now, but that these groups obviously wanted to ensure that they were successful. In other attempts that have occurred, usually a quarter or a half or sometimes none of the efforts work. But there was a concern, is this over? And no one can answer that question.
All right, well, how close now are they getting to actually identifying who they think they're going to be going after here?
Well, in the United States, the search is centering on 3 fronts. First, that car that was seized at Logan International Airport in Boston. Inside the car were flight training manuals. They're looking at that car. We've confirmed independently that indeed there are interesting items inside of that car that FBI agents want to look at. Also, another car was seized at Daytona Airport. In that car, again, there were items in Arabic apparently relating to Osama bin Laden, and that is the reason they are looking at that car. It has been towed away and is being looked at. And at a second location in Florida, in Venice, a couple there has been questioned by the FBI. They run a flight school, and they say that the FBI indicated to them that maybe 2 of their former students a year ago may have had something to do with the attacks yesterday, Leon.
Let me ask you about the material you say that was found in Boston, because our Bill Delaney was on about maybe an hour and a half or so ago, and he was saying that there was some concern that that information may actually be false information floating out there, because they would find it, because the experts he talked to found it so hard to believe that you would find something left behind that would be an Arabic flight training manual. Is something as specific as that being left behind in the wake of this?
Well, let me give you an example. The Daytona car may provide some answers to that. Maybe these people wanted those cars to be found, because we have indications in the Daytona car that information was left very obvious relating to Osama bin Laden, that it was left out there for people to see. So You know, you can speculate all you want about this, and it's difficult to know. The agents, the intelligence analysts themselves are really wrestling with this issue, and to second-guess a terrorist is a difficult thing to do.
All right, what about the overseas cooperation that we've been hearing about so much lately? That the U.S. is going to be seeking it from other states, other entities overseas. And we've heard also that many folks in the intelligence community are concerned that there is no human intelligence, at least not like there used to be. The U.S. doesn't have as many people on the ground in different places. Any concern that that fact alone will prevent them from finding out exactly who is responsible?
No, they do not think it will prevent them from finding out who is responsible for this. And what they're looking at is information that they developed over the last 2 years that Al-Qaeda is not a group, it's a network. And I think Secretary Powell said the same thing this morning. It is a network, and this network has been mutating over the past 2 years, and they've been trying to study this mutation. For example, Al-Qaeda has been reaching out to other terrorist groups, especially in North Africa and especially Algerians. And in 1994, for example, the only other case kind of similar to this was a hijacking that went bad for the Algerian terrorist group GIA, which has contacts to bin Laden. And in that case, they wanted to ram that jet into the Eiffel Tower, but that did not work. And so they're looking at that. They're also looking at possible significance of dates. Why did this happen in September? They know that bin Laden recently, and if you look at his most recent videotape that came out a few months ago, in that tape, he really embraces the Palestinian Intifada, which is a real shift for bin Laden. In the past, it has been American presence overseas. So they are looking at possible symbolism of September, going back to Black September, which was the radical Palestinian group that hijacked 4 planes back in 1970. 3 of those were successful hijackings, and also they were responsible for the Munich massacre during the Olympics. So they're looking at all of these things, going through their files, but nothing hard yet.
Yeah, it's a great indicator of just how much work there is to be done here. Mike Betcher, thank you very much. We'll be talking with you throughout the day on this one. Darren, over to you.
Leon, thank you. The stories about so many things, of course, fear and shock about what has happened to the United States. On a very practical matter, though, for many travelers, it means they are stuck wherever they were yesterday morning and they can't get home. Originally, the FAA had said early as possible the air restrictions on U.S. airspace would be lifted at noon today. We reported over an hour ago that that was not going to happen at noon. We have yet to hear what time that could be reinstated, but meanwhile, we're getting word that when flights do resume in the U.S., they will look very different than what we are used to as Americans. And with more on that, let's go to the White House, and our Kelly Wallace is standing by with more information on that. Kelly.
Well, Darren, obviously a big concern for many passengers around the country, but certainly a big concern for the administration. Senior administration officials telling my colleague John King just a short time ago that the full expectation is that Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta would have some announcement later today. Now, that the reason that this 12 noon Eastern time deadline has come and gone, we had senior administration officials telling CNN last night that the full expectation was that the airports would open at 12 noon Eastern time. The senior officials saying that the reason that deadline has come and gone and that the airports have not been reopened is that they really haven't had enough time to put sufficient security precautions in place. We heard Secretary Mineta say last night that they are going to impose tougher security guidelines and measures at the nation's airports before they reopen. Now, I did talk to another law enforcement source earlier who said, look, the U.S. government wants to be comfortable. It certainly wants to open up the airports as quickly as possible, get people back to normal, get U.S. business up and running. But the U.S. government also wants to be comfortable that proper security measures are in place. This source saying that there is a whole menu of recommendations on the table, including toughening security on the ground, such as checking in, such as identification, maybe even no curbside checking at some airports, and even some more security measures in the air, such as putting more air marshals on planes. So a lot of discussion right now, though, Darren. The full expectation, though, some announcement coming from Secretary Mineta later today. As you can see, the U.S. government trying to balance sort of competing priorities here, trying to get things back to normal as quickly as possible, but definitely wanting tougher security measures in place. Darren, back to you.
Clearly, people flying across America want it to be safe, Kelly. I think one of the things that's difficult right now, before travelers and their loved ones had that noon deadline to at least look forward to, and now not only did the administration take that off the table, they haven't even put another one on. Any word on when that announcement might come.
No, as I told you, my colleague John King, hearing that Secretary Mineta expected to make some sort of announcement today, some expectation that possibly airports could reopen today, according to one law enforcement source. But again, while you said, Darren, that many people sort of hoping that airports would be up and running, I bet you that a lot of the people around the country certainly want to make sure that tougher security measures in place, steps are being taken. There's a lot of concern, as we've heard reported all throughout the day. I heard it yesterday when I was up in New York. A lot of people are concerned about how could this happen? How could 4 airliners be hijacked? And so certainly I think the American people would like to sort of see tougher measures in place to try to, in some way, make sure this never happens again.
Yeah,
Darren, back to you.
absolutely. No one wants to fly if it's not safe. And you look at the same time, 4 different planes, 2 airlines, and 3 different airports, and it makes people feel very unsettled about how safe it is to fly here in the U.S. Kelly Wallace at the White House. Thank you, Leon.
Well, you know, this is a perfect point to check in on a few airports, and we've got a reporter spread out this morning. Kathleen Koch is standing by there at Dulles Airport, and we've got our Ed Lavandera. He's in Dallas, and Bill Delaney is standing by at Logan Airport, which is the point of much scrutiny today. Let's go now and start with Bill. Bill?
Well, much scrutiny. This airport is still closed, Leon, and closed indefinitely, but I want to say right at the beginning of our little report here, a rapidly developing situation. A local television station now reporting that the FBI has ID'd all suspects and is about to make arrests. We can't confirm that. It is being broadcast, however, on a usually reliable local station here in Boston. Now, what we also know, of course, has been reported throughout the morning. A car was taken from Logan Airport Central Parking Garage.
As well as Catholic schools are closed. Again, the United Nations has been shut down. Federal and local courthouses are closed today as well. New York City Public Library is closed. The 42nd Street branch only. The local branches are open. Colleges and universities, many of those are closed. We do have word, however, that Columbia University is holding classes today. The Postal Service has suspended service below 14th Street. All other area post offices are open. Broadway shows have been canceled. This is a Wednesday. That means matinees as well as the evening performances. And sporting events, particularly baseball games in the area, have been closed. We will obviously keep you updated on any other closings as they become available to us. Back to you guys in the studio.
And Sandra, of course, the New York Yankees most sensitive to those baseball closings because they are, of course, here in New York City. The Mets are on the road. The Yankees have not only canceled tonight, the Yankees have canceled tomorrow as well. It is the first time 2 baseball games in a row have been canceled since World War I, only the first time since D-Day that any games have been canceled. Even as the fire burned at the Pentagon, the military moved to establish an unprecedented air umbrella over New York City and Washington. The Atlantic Fleet carriers John F. Kennedy and the George Washington are headed up the East Coast with their battle groups. They sailed out of their Norfolk base yesterday. They are providing air cover, and they have a massive anti-aircraft capacity.
Steve, at the Pentagon, the grim task of recovering bodies has taken a turn, with officials saying that they do not expect to find any more survivors in the rubble. The death toll is estimated between 100 and 800, a very broad range right now. Andy Field is live for us in Washington and has more on this. Andy?
Well, Diana, there was a brief panic again at the Pentagon. Within the last hour, we saw rescue workers actually running from the building. There was a report from the military that they had spotted yet another plane in the vicinity of the Pentagon. Turns out a false alarm. It was a FEMA plane, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And you see the workers running from the building there. The plane was one of the very few in the nation that was allowed to be up in the air at this hour, possibly sending supplies back and help to New York City here. Now, the Pentagon says there is virtually no hope that they will spot any more bodies or any more people alive in the rubble there. The damage was that severe. President Bush at this hour is continuing to meet with his advisors in Washington, deciding how they'll respond and who they will target. But the main focus here in Washington today is the Pentagon, where the flames continue to burn. Firefighters can't say when they'll finally extinguish the Pentagon fire. The damage so massive they still can't reach deep inside the rubble. The Arlington fire chief says the crash here may have killed anywhere from 100 to 800 people. State Secretary Colin Powell promises retaliation, but says Americans must be patient.
I certainly hope we can find people that are targetable and we can take action directly against them. But we shouldn't just wait for a single target and then go after it militarily. There are many other things we can be doing to root out these networks, to pull up these places of haven, to destroy training camps. And it's going to take a concerted, long-term effort.
New York Senators Schumer and Clinton supported what will certainly be a unanimous resolution condemning the attacks and supporting any money New York and Washington needs to rescue and rebuild.
We will, in a united American response, support you, offer assistance to you, stand with you, and pursue those who reached deep into your families and homes yesterday and took someone you loved away from you.
President Bush met his national security team in the cabinet and promised there would be no budget limit when it came to rebuilding Lower Manhattan.
We are prepared to stand.
Now, Secretary of State Colin Powell has said that the nation is at war. But the big question now is, who is the enemy? We're live in Washington. I'm Andy Field, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you very much, Andy. We have just gotten this piece of information from Delta Airlines. They are telling us that there will be absolutely no Delta flights until at least 6 o'clock this evening. No Delta flights until at least 6 o'clock this evening. And of course, we're waiting to hear more from the FAA a little bit later. They'll be having a news conference, and we'll bring information to you regarding that news conference. Here in New York City, if you have been out on the streets, you